You're listening to the Financial Source podcast on YouTube.
Welcome to the Financial Source podcast.
Glad to be here.
We're looking at a central bank that seems to be standing perfectly still today.
While the rest of the world is just moving at breakneck speed, from commodities to geopolitical flashpoints.
Exactly. It's Wednesday, January 28th, 2026, and the Federal Reserve held rates steady overnight. But the really interesting part is that their internal consensus is cracking.
And it's happening just as tensions with Iran are threatening a major escalation.
So today we're going to explain why two dissenting votes at the Federal Reserve actually matter more than the rate decision itself, why gold has surged to $5,600, and how global trade lines are being redrawn, from Mexico all the way to Beijing.
Let's unpack it.
Yeah, let's get into it. It really is one of those days where the headline, it just doesn't tell you the whole story.
Not at all. You have to read the fine print.
Okay, so let's start with that big headline, the one everyone saw. The Federal Reserve kept interest rates unchanged.
Yep, holding steady in that 3.5 to 3.75% range.
On the surface, that sounds like a bit of a snooze fest, right? Just a standard wait-and-see kind of meeting.
On the surface, yes. But if you lift the hood on that decision, the engine is making a completely different noise.
How so?
Well, the decision to hold was expected. That part wasn't a surprise. But the vote, that was a surprise. We saw a 10-2 split.
And that's the aha moment for me. Because usually these votes are unanimous, or maybe you get one dissenter, dragging their feet. But two
dissenters, yeah. That feels significant.
Who were they?
It's very significant. We had members Marin and Waller, and they both dissented in favor of a 25 basis point cut.
Immediately.
And that signals that the internal policy debate at the Federal Reserve is, it's widening.
So they're not a unified bloc anymore.
For a long time they were, marching in lockstep with this whole higher for longer narrative. But now we're starting to see cracks in that consensus. It suggests that inside that room, there's a growing group that believes the economy needs relief now, not later.
So the Federal Reserve isn't the monolith it was 6 months ago. That's a huge shift in the narrative.
A huge shift.
And then we got Chair Powell's press conference. I listened to his commentary, and he seemed to be walking a very, very fine line.
That's the classic central banker two-step, isn't it?
Yeah. He called the economy's pace solid, but then he immediately flagged inflation as somewhat elevated. It felt like he was trying to keep everyone happy without really committing.
He was, but there was a key insight in how he framed the current rates. He described them as being at the higher end of the neutral range.
Okay, let's pause on that higher end of the neutral range.
Sure.
For someone listening who isn't an economist, what does that actually mean?
It means Powell believes that right now interest rates are restrictive, but, just slightly. They aren't slamming on the brakes, but they're not on the gas either.
Just tapping the brakes.
Just tapping them. And the really fascinating part was his comment on tariffs. He suggested that if tariff-driven goods pricing peaks this year, it gives the Federal Reserve room to loosen policy.
So he's basically telegraphing a potential cut.
He's essentially telling the market, look, we see the inflation from trade policy, we think it's temporary, and once it passes, we can cut.
Which is a pretty dovish signal, just wrapped in some very cautious language. It sounds like he's looking for an exit ramp.
That's a good way to put it.
So how did the market take all this? So the dollar was a little softer, but the sky didn't fall?
No major crash. The dollar gave back some ground, but because there wasn't a massive shock, just this, subtle shift in the wind with the dissenters, the reaction was pretty subdued. The currency markets are drifting rather than racing.
Okay, so paper money, the dollar is drifting. But let's switch gears and talk about hard assets. Because if you look at the commodities market, it is telling a much, much more dramatic story.
Oh, absolutely. This is where the real action is.
We have to talk about gold. Spot prices have hit a fresh record high. We're moving toward $5,600 an ounce.
$5,600.
That number.
Yeah.
It just sounds insane to me. What is driving this? Is it just people hedging against inflation, or is there something else going on?
It is so much more than just inflation. At this price point, gold is behaving as the cleanest expression of uncertainty in the global system.
The cleanest expression of uncertainty. I like
yeah.
that.
Even though the Federal Reserve didn't cut rates, which is usually the thing that boosts gold, the demand for protection is just intense. When you have geopolitical lines fracturing and trade wars heating up, capital wants a bunker, and gold is that bunker.
It's the ultimate panic room. It feels like a vote of no confidence in the geopolitical order.
I think that's right.
But it's not just the shiny stuff. Copper is absolutely tearing it up, too. Futures are back above $6 a pound, and on the London Metal Exchange, it printed a record above $14,000 a ton.
A record, yeah.
So is this just investors getting excited, taking on risk, or is there a fundamental reason for copper to be this expensive?
This is not just risk-on excitement. This is about supply, and it's about strategy. You have to remember, copper is the backbone of the energy transition, of all our digital infrastructure.
Right.
But right now, what we're seeing is a repricing of hard assets in a world that's being shaped by trade policy. If you are worried about supply chains breaking between, say, the East and the West, you buy the physical metal now. It reflects a tightening supply expectation and the broader theme that, in a fragmented world, physical commodities carry a premium.
So it's not just about building houses. It's about securing the raw materials before the doors close.
Exactly.
Speaking of raw materials, oil is holding firm, too.
Yeah.
We saw crude supported, and I know part of that was the Energy Information Administration report showing a bigger draw on stockpiles than expected.
The fundamentals are there. Yes, inventories are down. But let's be honest, the oil price right now is being propped up by fear. There is a massive geopolitical premium baked into every single barrel.
Specifically related to Iran.
Specifically Iran.
And that brings us to, I think, the heaviest part of our discussion today, the geopolitical situation. Because you have the Federal Reserve acting all calm, but the headlines coming out of the Middle East are anything but.
Anything but is putting it mildly. The center of gravity for global risk right now is Iran.
We're seeing reports that former President Trump is considering a new large-scale strike on Iran after nuclear talks stalled. And this isn't just a rumor, right?
Yeah.
We're hearing about specific demands being put on the table.
Correct. United States and European Union officials have reportedly laid out 3 non-negotiable demands: a permanent end to uranium enrichment, limits on ballistic missiles, and an end to their support for proxy groups.
That's a huge ask.
It is. The message being sent is that the time for negotiation is ending and the pressure campaign is escalating rapidly.
That's asking a regime to fundamentally alter its entire defense strategy. And the response from Tehran, it hasn't exactly been diplomatic.
No. Iran's representative to the United Nations warned of, and I'm quoting here, uncontrolled consequences. But even more concerning was the rhetoric from an advisor to the supreme leader. He dismissed the whole idea of a limited strike.
What did he say?
He said explicitly that any military action would be treated as the start of a full-blown war and promised an unprecedented response.
That word unprecedented is doing a lot of heavy lifting there. That is, frankly, terrifying language.
It is.
It explains why oil is bid up and why the stock market might be feeling a little nervous, even if it's not crashing yet.
For sure.
But what I find so fascinating is the contrast. You have this massive tension with Iran, but then you look at Venezuela, and the U.S. seems to be taking a totally different approach.
It's a study in contrasts. While the pressure dials up on Iran, the U.S. is actively using diplomacy to manage energy flows with Venezuela.
Right. I saw Treasury Secretary Bessent explicitly stated that increased Venezuelan crude supply lowers fuel prices.
He did. He even noted that proceeds from those sales will return to the Venezuelan people.
And I also read that the U.S. is reportedly handing over a seized oil tanker back to Venezuela. That feels like a pretty big olive branch.
It is. It reinforces this idea that energy flows are being managed through diplomacy just as much as open markets. The U.S. needs to keep oil prices stable, especially with this Iran risk looming.
So you squeeze one producer while easing up on another.
It's strategic pragmatism. It's 4D chess with oil barrels.
Right. And meanwhile, in Europe, we have the ongoing situation with Ukraine and Russia. Is there?
Yeah.
Is there any movement there?
There's activity. I wouldn't call it a breakthrough, though. U.S. Secretary of State Rubio suggested a U.S. presence at talks in Abu Dhabi this weekend to try and bridge the issue regarding the Donbass region. It keeps the door for diplomacy open, but for now, the market is just viewing it as background hum compared to the siren alarm ringing in the Middle East.
Okay, so we've got the Fed holding, commodities booming, war drums beating, but there's another layer to these global shifts, and that's trade. The way countries do business with each other is being rewritten in real time.
Absolutely. The architecture of global trade is being renovated. Just look at North America.
Right. The U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, the USMCA, United States Trade Representative Greer is engaging with Mexico right now. What are they actually discussing?
Well, they're looking at things like non-tariff barriers. They're talking about stricter rules of origin, critical minerals. But the subtext here is strategic competition. The U.S. wants to ensure that North America is a fortress for manufacturing.
And that Chinese goods aren't leaking into the supply chain through the back door.
Through the back door of Mexico, exactly. It's about closing the loopholes.
And it's not just Mexico. I saw something interesting with Canada and South Korea. They signed an OAL to bring Korean auto manufacturing to Canada.
That is a textbook example of friendshoring. It's not just about where it's cheapest to build a car anymore. It's about building your supply chains with your allies.
Friendshoring, I like that term.
South Korea and Canada are aligning their industrial bases. It's a defensive move against global instability. It's like saying, I'll only do business with you if we're in the same group chat.
Exactly. And speaking of group chats, Prime Minister Starmer from the UK is in Beijing meeting with President Xi. That seems like a delicate dance.
Very delicate. And Xi's comment that the relationship has had twists and turns.
Yeah, that's diplomatic code for we have had some serious problems.
It is. But despite that, the British pound sterling is reclaiming the 1.38 level against the dollar. It's ignoring domestic news and just focusing on these high-level political shifts. The currency markets seem to think that engagement might stabilize things.
Yeah, okay, so let's bring this all back. For someone listening, trying to make sense of this for their portfolio or even just their peace of mind, we've looked at the Fed, commodities, war, trade. When we look at the stock market, though, it feels weirdly calm.
It does. The reaction in equities was very restrained. We had big tech earnings that were kind of a mixed bag. Meta surged, Microsoft slipped, Tesla gained a bit. But overall, the market is calm on the surface.
It feels like a paradox to me. How can we have stable rates and calm stocks on one side and then gold at $5,600 and war rhetoric on the other? Those two realities don't seem to match.
They don't match, and that is the key takeaway. There's a real disconnect here. The equity market is looking at the Federal Reserve and saying, okay, rates are steady, the economy is solid, everything is fine.
But the commodities market is looking at Iran and trade wars and is just screaming, take cover.
Exactly. So who's right?
That's the question.
While the commodities market is usually the first to price in fear, that risk premium is so evident in gold and oil, the equity market, you could argue, might be complacent. My view here is that the next big catalyst for the market probably won't be economic data like inflation or jobs. It's going to be geopolitical.
And if that situation in Iran escalates,
The calm in the stock market could evaporate very, very quickly.
that is a sobering thought. We are watching the currencies too. The euro seems stable, with the European Central Bank's Schnabel saying rates are steady, and the Japanese yen is drifting back to 153 against the dollar.
Yes, and the yen is acting as that sort of defensive anchor. It's just sitting there, waiting. If things go wrong in the Middle East, you will likely see a rush into the yen and the Swiss franc, along with gold.
So it's a holding pattern.
Right now, the currency market is in a holding pattern, just like the Federal Reserve. But holding patterns don't last forever.
No, they don't. And I think that's the big lesson from today. The stillness at the Federal Reserve is deceptive. Underneath, the tectonic plates of the global economy, energy, gold, alliances are shifting violently.
Exactly right. Don't mistake a lack of volatility in the S&P 500 for a lack of risk in the world. The signals are flashing red. They just happen to be flashing in the commodities pit, not on the stock ticker.
And that is where we leave it for today. A world of diverging signals, massive stakes, and a golden canary in the coal mine that just hit $5,600.
It certainly gives you plenty to think about.
Thanks for listening to the Financial Source Podcast. See you next time.
Appreciate you tuning in. Join us again on the Financial Source Podcast.